Welcome to the SwimSwam podcast. I'm your host, Coleman Hodges. Joining me today, I have got two very special guests. We have got Chris Mooney, the head coach of the USC High Performance Swimming, and we've got Mark McKeown, head of physical performance at the University of the Sunshine Coast. Chris, Mark, how are you doing today?
Very good, Coleman. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yes, good. Thank you, Coleman. Thank you for having us.
I'm super excited to talk to you guys. We talked to Kaylee McKeown. Sorry, I had to think about that. Kaylee McKeown. Didn't want to get that last name wrong. Just a few days ago, she was SwimSwam's 2020 World Female Swimmer of the Year, as well as the Oceania Swimmer of the Year. And as we were talking, it came up that I asked her about her weekly training cycle. She was like, at USC, we do something a little different. We do 21-day cycles, and that started in about late 2018. My mind was blown. I had never heard of something like this in swimming before. We talked a little bit about it, and she was like, well, you should talk to Chris and Mark. They're the ones who really brought it to life. And so I'm excited to sit down with you guys and talk about how this 21-day training cycle came to be. So Mark, let's start with you. Give me a little background on this idea.
So, Coleman, I've been working with the swimming program at USC since 2011. We set up an Olympic program leading into London, and it started off as a para program. And then Chris joined the program a few years later. But so that we'd been working in swimming for a period of time. And when the two coaches of the para and the ABLE program, we started aligning our kind of programs. And there was, my role really is to kind of support the head coaches in developing a program, both that includes the swimming and the dryland stuff around getting the best out of the program. Our goal was we wanted to medal at Olympics for as many of our swimmers as possible. And over a period of months, the discussions that we'd had really was around how do we improve, as Chris mentioned previously, the capacity and the power of our swimmers in our swim program. And, we kind of talked about it a lot. And, from my perspective, the limitation in the traditional model of 7 days was always, we only had 1 day off. And, in training, you can only really respond and adapt to that which you can recover from. And so if we have a limited recovery period, we then also have a limited amount of training we can actually do before we end up putting our swimmers in a hole 6-8 weeks down the track. So the whole idea started off with, in my mind, was how do I really develop an improved recovery cycle? And, we talked about doing the day-to-day recovery, pre and post training and the things they do at home, but we really needed to develop a thinking around an extended recovery period on a more regular basis that would allow us then to take training to a new level that allow them more time to recover from. Because if we can't train harder and do more if we're still only getting them 1 day off at the end of each week. So that really is where my thinking started. So I played with this model, and I had a number of different ideas around how I would structure it. With that thinking the whole time of, we have an accumulation block of work where we gradually build fatigue and training and volume and intensity to a point where the athletes are really on the edge. And then we try and hold them there for a period of time. And then I give them this big block of time off. So I developed this 21-day model around a 10-day block of accumulation, a 7-day block of intensification, and then 4 days off. And I played with the ideas. I kind of firmed it in my mind. And then I kind of sat down with Chris and Nathan, who's the para coach, and kind of said, look, we've been having these discussions about how we improve our program. Here's something that's a little bit different. What do you think? And so we kind of talked it through. I explained my thinking. They started putting in their ideas. They got quite excited about looking at something that was really quite novel. We kind of talked about the benefits and the pros and the cons and all of that. And then we tweaked all little bits and pieces. We kind of, instead of starting the 3-day cycle, for example, with the swim in the morning and an afternoon, we decided we would only start it with one in the morning, because after 4 days off, we didn't want them to come back and then smash them day one because they were fresh. So, we kind of tweaked a whole lot of things. I think, Chris, it probably took us another 4 to 6 weeks to really firm up with what that 21-day model would look like. We all agreed that it was worth doing, and Chris will probably explain his version of that as well. And at that point, we then made the decision that we were going to go with this, and we kind of started to develop that. And obviously, between then and now, it's evolved. We've modified some of the particular sessions that we include on different days and in dry land, but essentially that 3-week model has become a very strong part of our program, and I think is actually starting to show in the results that we've started to produce with nearly everyone in our program.
Chris, thoughts?
Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Pretty well, you covered everything. We are a power and capacity based philosophy program, and I think the challenges with that was to try and keep those capacities as well balanced as we could throughout the year, and not be too heavy in the aerobic side of things, and the anaerobic capacity suffer because of it. And Mark mentioned 4 to 6 weeks. It was definitely a 6-week conversation regarding, okay, well, we haven't just got sprint-based athletes in the program. We've got middle distance swimmers, we've got form strokers, we've got distance swimmers. So I think it was probably a credit to Nathan, Mark, and myself to have the ability to identify that, yes, this is the best way forward for us to improve and to take this next coaching philosophy of power and capacity forward, and keeping it balanced, but not only just working for a sprint-based athlete or a mature-aged athlete or an age group athlete, but within that 3-week macro cycle, we're able to massage the workouts and the programming to support all types of athletes. We have a professional group. We surround ourselves with the very best. We all use the same massage and physiotherapist. We all use the same nutritionist. We also use the same clinical psychologist, and we have a lot of opportunity, not just with contact time with those people, whether it be on the massage table or in the gym or in the conditioning arena or what have you. We actually come together every week to talk about individual athletes and the individual planning and how it's looking. And we also have the contact time with individual staff members on full deck. So when it comes time to making a decision, and when it came time to putting this plan together, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but we had this rule that we weren't all allowed to agree. So if there was 6 professional facilitators sitting at the table, and it came around to you, and there was 5 yeses already, you knew that the 6th person, whether it was yourself or Mark, had to say no. We haven't made any of these changes. We haven't created this innovative way of coaching just by us all nodding our heads and agreeing and just getting excited with the format. It was definitely something that we sat down, chewed over hard on, and really made sure that we didn't roll anything out until we had the right answers or the ability to train something or focus on something and then have a test for it. So it's quite in depth, and I'm pretty sure that we'll work our way into how in depth and what the bits and pieces are of our philosophies moving forward through this conversation today.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds super interesting. As a coach, it sounds terrifying. Trying something that I don't know if radical is the right word, but it's certainly different, especially in the swimming sphere. I don't, again, I've never heard of anyone else doing something like that. And so it just, I think the biggest thing for me when I heard it, the biggest like, whoa, is that you have those 4 days off, which, Mark explained, you can recover more, therefore you can work more. That totally makes sense to me. But, taking 4 days off in the swimming world is like, it's sacrilege, right? Like you can't be out of the water that long because like you'll lose the feel. And I mean, just before you even implemented this, what was your thought on that part of it?
Well, for a start, what we do at USC is something that we enjoy doing, and that does, and because we do it, doesn't necessarily make it right, and it doesn't necessarily make what everybody else is doing wrong. So I just want to make that very, very clear. This is something that we've chosen to do because I felt, and as Mark mentioned earlier, that we were getting one area wrong as a staff or as a coach. It was getting the adaptation right. And when you say we have 4 days off, we don't have 4 days off from being an athlete. We still expect the athlete to use their AI, their athletic intelligence. And I suppose the big supporter of that accountability around that is our values that we have as a team. We don't use the word culture or resilience. We have three values, and they're simple values, but they're very important values to us. So that it's attitude, respect, and accountability. So each day that we come to practice, the athletes are aware of those three values, and those three values also extend into 4-day adaptation. Those values also very important to us as a group. In the afternoons that we're not prescribing workouts, because there's also quite a few sessions where the athletes are away from. So we swim most mornings, but we do have some afternoons off. They've only got the afternoons off from the black line. They haven't got the afternoon off from being an athlete. And I've watched a little bit of Kaylee's podcast and talked about the whole COVID shutdown and so forth like that. And I remember when it all happened, I said to Mark, I said, mate, we're not going to realise whether or not we've got this right or whether we've got this wrong till about January, February next year. And I think one thing that we had in our favour is that we had a group of athletes that were very value-driven, and one of the big values that we rely on is accountability. So when we were down and out for 9 weeks, we were able to prescribe some workouts for them that we really trust their athletes that they were strong in that value of accountability. And they made some really good lifestyle choices around what they were doing. It just so happens that we weren't prescribing it, and I think that really allowed us to get back, and I think we got back into shape pretty quick. And but it's a big factor, Mark, behind why we can trust not only the 4 days adaptation, but the ability for the athletes to not always have workouts prescribed for them. I really feel as though, and this is just my opinion, I really feel that swimming is a heavily prescribed sport. I don't think there's too many other sports out there where coaches prescribe as hard as what we do, and as often as what we do. And you've got 26-year-old, 24-year-old, 16-year-old athletes. It's really nice to help promote an opportunity for them to create that value of accountability. And it's a big value in our program, and therefore it helps the culture. It helps create the resilience and helps then create a trust value as well. That's it's a little invisible one to the side. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Coleman, probably the thing that I want to kind of reinforce here is when people design a program, they typically look at a structure. And so, for example, swimming typically is 5.5 days or 6.5 days a week and then 1 day off. And people often start with that and then build the program around that. And when we sat down to do this, we thought, if we're going to look at this fresh, we need to start fully fresh. And that means rather than trying to build a program using physiological and training principles into a structure that is there, we needed to throw out the structure and start with what do we need physiologically? What is our goal from a training perspective What are the energy systems? What is the stroke quality? What are we looking for? And does that fit into a traditional 7-day model? And if it doesn't, then we're not kind of grasping at straws here. We went right back to the science of training. We looked at all of the physiology involved. We looked at the biomechanical components required. We put all that together, and that's how the 3-week cycle came up. It wasn't that we didn't like the 7-day one, but we couldn't fit all of the things that we wanted in this new approach into the traditional model. So most people will start a program going, oh, okay, swimming 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off for 5.5 days. Then they worry about what they do in it. Well, we threw that out and we started with a blank page. And that allowed us to have a different perspective on when we train, how long we train for, what volume of work we do. And that's kind of really where it started. And, you know, I can guarantee you that the science of training and the understanding of the energy systems is very inherent in our program, but it's just not built into the traditional 7-day model.
And that makes total sense. And I love that you guys did that and have done that and are doing that. And so let's get into it. Take me through. So you said it's 10 days and then 7 days and then 4 days. So let's start with those 10 days. What are you hoping to accomplish in those first 10 days of this cycle?
So the 10 days is really our accumulation period. And in that, we break it down into smaller blocks again. So we've got a 2-day lead-in, which means we load them back up again after having 4 days off. And then we have, you know, kind of 4 to 6 days of really solid work where, you know, volumes are up, sessions are a bit longer. It's more about capacity building. It doesn't mean we don't do any of the speed work or the power capacity work in those sessions, but there's an emphasis on, you know, creating overload through the longer, harder, bigger blocks of work. And then towards the end of that, we have 2 days where we start to taper off a little bit in preparation for the 7 days of intensification. So essentially in the first 10 days, they'll swim 15 times. And that means swimming through the weekend. So that first weekend, days 6 and 7, they swim twice on the Saturday and they swim once on the Sunday. And then they rock up again to Monday, which is day 8, and they're doing 2 sessions again. So effectively, there is no weekend in weekend 1 of this 3-week cycle. So they swim from Monday to Wednesday, 2 on, 1 off, 1 on, 2 off the whole way through. Then on top of that, they do a gym session on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then we also, every morning, we do what we call, you know, our dry land work. And so athletes arrive at 5:45 in the morning. We do alternate between what we call functional postural movement training. We do spin cycling conditioning training, and then we do stretching, core, and, you know, shoulder kind of prehab work. And they vary, but they are very solid sessions. And that's done from 6 a.m. to 6:30 every morning. And then they hit the pool from 6:30 to whenever. And then after that, on the Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, they'll come back in to do their gym session. And from a strength and conditioning perspective, the traditional model really only allowed a strength and conditioning coach to engage with the swimmers in the time that they were in the gym. You know, maybe that's 2 or 3 sessions a week. And if we wanted to provide that athlete with a better capacity, resilience, ability to handle the work that Chris then wanted to give them in the water, we actually needed to see them more often. That doesn't mean we need to do more gym, but it meant we needed to see them and prepare them and get them physically ready for that work in other ways. We do a huge amount of shoulder band work. We really beat up their shoulders with the shoulder TheraBands. You know, we really give them a hard time with their shoulders, but in doing that, we've almost eliminated shoulder problems from our program now for multiple years. We just don't have the same shoulder problems because of the work that we do. We spend a lot of time with teaching them how to hinge correctly at the hips, how to hold their ribs in the correct position through streamlining. And all of that's done through those functional posture sessions where they are trained, and we do lots and lots of work on the floor in maintaining good posture, holding it, and then creating movement around that. So our job, really, our physical performance staff, is to get that athlete ready to cope with whatever Chris wants to do with them. Because if they can't swim fast, if they're missing swim sessions, if they're injured, if they're out of the pool, if they're tired, if they can't do the work he wants, they can't swim faster. So our job 100% of the time is to make sure that they're available for every single swim session that Chris wants to do. I'll let Chris talk about the 10-day cycle for a bit then.
I'm enjoying this. It's actually refreshing to hear. And that's why we're both on this morning, I guess, is, Mark has a doctorate in human movement and just an amazing amount of knowledge and around the sciences that have been involved in to help us put this program together. And I suppose my value and my big value is the practical side. So it's good to have the theory being spoken, but it's also hopefully I can add the practical side to help everybody out there that may be listening. But exactly like so, our conditioning sessions, for our aerobic girls could be quite different to our sprinters. We see that as an opportunity to in that first. That first week of the training phase, the accumulation phase, we see that as an opportunity to help us with our aerobic conditioning. So if it's 30 minutes of aerobic work in the gym as a part of their conditioning, that adds to the aerobic or the energy system that we're trying to challenge in the pool for that accumulation week. Sprinters, they'll be a little bit different in that space. Probably not as full on as what the aerobic team will be doing. But what we do find is that when they are hitting the water of a morning, there's probably a less amount of warm up in the session. But there's also and it allows us to probably focus a little bit more on activation sort of drills and skills. So we've used that 30 minutes not only as a conditioning base, and we've also used it as an opportunity to say, right, well, we've spent the 30 minutes on creating and warming up the core body temperature. We're actually ready to go now onto some skills and drills, and then bang us. Sprinters love it because then we can get straight into the main set and swim them down and recover them and get them out of there. Like Mark said, again, first 3 sessions, the single Monday and the double Tuesday, that will grow in. First session of the week might be about 4.5 kilometres, usually a long course. The second session will probably be about 5 kilometres, and then the third session will probably be at about 5.5, and then we go. And then the specificity around the groups or the athletes then starts from there. It took us a little while, Mark, to get everybody used to that first weekend, coming into the Saturday and then having to wake up on the Sunday and come in. But it just took something very simple like, hey, guys, grab a calendar, put it on your fridge, and then every 3 weeks I want you to highlight your Thursday, your Friday, your Saturday, your Sunday, and then mark that out throughout the year. So then, when you are trying to plan something away with your friends or your family or your partners, you can actually get quite excited about those 4 days of adaptation more so than the weekend that you're actually swimming. And had a little situation not long ago where we went back into 2 weeks of just normal weekly meso cycles, and there was an uproar. The athletes are going, I can't believe we have did this for so long. When do we start back the 3-week macro cycle? So even though it took us a little bit of time for everyone to get used to the macro cycle, they certainly appreciate the ability to, when the work's on, and when the specificity around the work is being prescribed, they feel good about it. They know that the energy systems are primed. They know that the aerobic muscle fatigue may not be there. What is there is the opportunity to increase those ceilings of whatever capacity we're going after, whether it's anaerobic or anaerobic power or aerobic power. No matter what it is, you can massage within that 3 weeks, and it seems to work really well for all types of athletes at the moment.
Tom, and I'll keep bringing up these points, but if you listen to what Chris has said, I'm not sure whether people understand some of that reasoning. For example, if we're warming them up differently before they hit the water, and they're doing less warm up, it means less rubbish, kilometers and meters in the pool, and more quality meters in the pool. So they're still doing the same volume, but we're not wasting time with doing a warm up at a sub-maximal pace. We're getting straight into the quality work for a longer period of time. So there's automatically better value there. If we're warming them up in other ways, we're actually managing load in their shoulders differently. So we're not putting them through sloppy warm-up meters where they're probably gradually getting their head into gear and their shoulders are all over the place and their feel of the water's awful. So in terms of managing load and managing shoulder load in particular, tremendous benefits in this approach, because we're not wasting time in the water just because we need to warm up in the water. So the benefits then explode in multiple directions because of the value of doing it that particular way.
Which obviously is a huge benefit, huge whoa kind of moment to the swimming crowd, because obviously shoulder problems are extremely common in our sport. And so it's super interesting. It makes a lot of sense. And I think we've kind of seen some people doing more and more, certainly our top college programs here in the United States and the pro swimmers are doing more, putting more of an emphasis on activation, dry land, stuff outside the pool. And as seen by you guys, it seems to be working. So we're down to about 9 minutes. I have to ask about rest, because taper is the swimmer's best friend, right? And, Kaylee, I know Kaylee mentioned that if you do go into a rest period, you go back to those mini cycles of 6 or 7 days or a week. And so how did you guys grapple with, we're doing the 21-day cycle in season. And then how did you decide how to manage resting, athletes when bigger meets were coming up?
Well, that one was sort of came out of a necessity, mainly because we've now changed our selection criteria very similar to the Americans. We trial out 5 weeks from the benchmark event. So it just meant that 3-week macro cycle wasn't going to work. We don't use the word taper. We call it performance ready, because taper to me is different to maybe what some athletes are used to. And again, depending on what type of athlete you are, will depend on what that process looks like. So we brought it back to 5 weeks, because then we usually then say, right, 5 weeks out, we'll start those performance ready cycles. We'll hit the meet. Hopefully we'll qualify. Usually give the athletes a couple of days off to reflect that adaptation and the whole neural stimulus, rest, and sort of adapt again. And then we pretty much just follow that same 5-week race performance ready cycle leading into the benchmark meet that we used for the trial selection. So, it came out of more of a necessity due to the fact that instead of trialing in April, 5 weeks prior to the big race.
And we work backwards, Coleman. So we go to our key events, and we put in our 5-week performance ready cycles, and they're 5 1-week cycles, and then we load our 3-week cycles back to our present point, and then we manipulate that around holidays like Christmas blocks of time and whatever. But essentially, that's the same model that everyone does. You work backwards from key events, put in your key blocks of cycles, and Chris can tell you every Monday morning of day 1 of each cycle how many more 3-week cycles we've got to go. He uses that language often with the swimmers, so they know they've got 23-week cycles to go or 15 3-week cycles to go, and it makes it real because it's a smaller number. If you walked in and said we've got 42 weeks to go, they'd go, oh, cool. But if you go, we've got 12 3-week cycles to go, they go, holy cow, we need to get serious. So that language is really important part of our program as well.
And we do use the same language, no matter what facilitator, what area of facilitation you're coming from. The language is the same. So everyone is on the same page when we're talking about setups or challenges or or goals and so forth. But yeah, we do reverse periodize, and that's probably the other good thing about our macro cycle is we can massage it a little bit. We call it, there might be a period of time where we're calling certain phase of accumulation. Well, that's just the adjective of what that particular phase is. That can change. It could go back to a block of heart rate training for our distance athletes or our open water athletes, and so that phase would be there for instead of an accumulation phase, that we could change that and talk about it as being a basic aerobic phase or a heart rate phase or what have you. So it's just the way we'd be able to find. Just helps us throughout the year to not only have our systems balanced, but we put a lot of emphasis on racing. Racing is really important to us, and we're able to get up and swim fast at most meets. And I think that's a credit to the macro cycle. I think that's a credit to the way that it's able to allow us to be balanced. Because if you're, I think racing is the best form of training, and I don't want to waste those opportunities. So when we go to race, we're race ready, and that's usually because we haven't got tapered or rested. It's just it's in the pathway of the programming that's reverse periodized and identify that, okay, in this particular week we're coming off a 3-day training session going into an adaptation. Instead of adaptation, we'll be racing, and then we'll give them the adaptation off the back of the racing, and then start the macro cycle off the back of that. So you have that ability to hit meets in the cycle, and then massage and then start fresh with those 3-week macro cycles post competitions, which is quite unique. And a lot of times you do swim fast. It's not because we've rested. It's just because it's built into our program. If we weren't racing, we were suiting up anyway, doing time trials or doing max efforts in those sessions. It's just that we've got that next best option, and that is to stand up and compete against others instead of just our training team.
Coleman, one of the things that was really critical to our program as well was when we first started the 3-week cycles, was educating swimmers on how they would feel at different points in time. And because it was a different approach, they weren't starting Monday morning of each cycle feeling the same as the previous Monday. So I actually went away and wrote up a descriptor of, okay, you're coming in on day 1, you're going to feel like this. Your body's going to be fresh, you're going to be ready to go. On day 8, which is Monday of week 2, you're actually going to start feeling really heavy. You're probably going to be a little bit frustrated. You're probably going to feel a bit annoyed. Don't be disrespectful to your coach, but we also understand that you're going to be feeling this way. So we're not going to engage you or push you. We just want you to come in and do your job. And we wrote this description of how they might behave, how they might be thinking, how they might be feeling, to educate them on how they would be throughout the 3-week block of time. And, you get to 4 days, and swimmers having 4 days off, they actually have a normal life. And so they get to go away, they go up the beach, they visit family, they go to the movies, and they come back in and they're actually normal human beings again, instead of coming back in after 1 day off, spending at home on the couch because they're dead from last week and not having that social time with family and friends. So that was a really big part of the program as well, to connect back to normal life a little bit more.
I think that's a great finishing or note to finish on. We're down to less than a minute. Chris, Mark, I really appreciate you guys coming on. I might just have to ping you again, bring you back. This topic is so interesting. We could talk about it for hours, but I do really appreciate you guys sitting down and taking the time to explain this to me a little bit. It was great talking with you.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.